Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. In today's video we're going over pool value of 3.0 Wuthering waves in phase 2. So as you all know, we have Augusta and Mornye and Iuno. In this video I will give you my honest thoughts and opinion on all of three of these, telling you exactly what you can expect from pulling these units and what you should look forward for before you pull these units, so you can actually know exactly whether or not you should pull any of them. So the first one that will go will be Augusta. Augusta is the first rerun, and in my opinion Augusta is one of the best DPSs in the game. She's very easy to gear up, she's very easy to build. As you can see, my stats doesn't really look that crazy, but I can assure you that I clear with this Augusta very comfortably. Even when she doesn't crit on some of the moves, when she doesn't hit crit, I still comfortably clear the hardest content in game. That is why she's so valuable. Next thing that's very important about Augusta is that her abilities are all heavy attack damage, right? And so because everything is considered heavy attack damage, she has multiple supports. One of them is Iuno, which is currently on a banner, and she amplifies heavy attack damage by 50%. And also, because Augusta has a lot of synergy with shields, she casts a lot of them. She also gets a lot of bonus from this Blessing of One Light, which is basically extra 40% damage amp on Augusta. So 90% damage amp from Iuno. That's a very powerful buff. Now for Augusta, you can pull her signature, which is in my opinion kinda not really so valuable. Or you can pull the newest Broadblade, standard Broadblade, get the critical damage and attack percentage, and basically have your Augusta ready for endgame. So she's very easy to gear up when it comes to weapons, and you can for the future wait for this weapon called Verdant Summit, which will be on the banner with Jian. So when Jian comes back, you can get this weapon and Augusta will basically be at her full power, because her signature is good, but again, it's not as future-proof as Verdant Summit, so I would suggest waiting for this weapon. It's way better in my opinion, and you can basically gear up any future Broadblade heavy attack damage user. So it's way better to wait for this weapon, because it's kind of like 10% only weaker than her best weapon. And in some cases it can be even stronger if you like quick swap and those kind of stuff. So very good weapon. So make sure to wait for this weapon and don't pull her weapon if you can secure this new standard Broadblade. So that's very important for Augusta. She's very powerful DPS, as I said before. She's definitely not going to disappoint. She's very strong, easy to learn rotation, and she does a lot of damage effortlessly. And so yeah, as you can see, energy regen should be, in my opinion, at 120%. Attack, it can be as high as you can possibly get. It doesn't really matter, this is just my build. Crit rate should be at least 70%, so you can actually have more consistent crits. Crit damage should be like 280% at least, so you can actually have consistent high damage output. This one still does a lot of damage, but ideally I want to build her better. I was kind of busy building other units and putting resources elsewhere, so I didn't really put it on the Augusta. Since I pulled Augusta and Iuno, funny enough, I haven't even used Augusta that much. I used her on the last reset, and on this reset I used Augusta, and honestly she feels like a newest unit. She feels very strong. So honestly, Augusta is basically a long-term unit. In my opinion, you can never make a mistake with pulling Augusta. She's, without a doubt, even though I'm a Calcharo main, I have to admit, this Electro DPS is the best in the game. So yeah, if you want the best Electro DPS, Augusta is basically the best option you can possibly get. So now you have the opportunity to get a powerful DPS. She also works with someone like Profesy, and Profesy, as you can see, he can equip Static Mist, giving incoming Resonator from 10% attack all the way up to 20% attack boost depending on your rank. I have rank 2 of this weapon, so I have like higher attack boost for incoming Resonator for 14 seconds. And basically every Resonator's like DPS rotation lasts for like 12 seconds, so you will not lose this buff whatsoever. Energy regen is very good for sub DPS, so very good for someone like Mortefi. And if you pull the LYNAE on phase 1, you can also slot LYNAE on your Augusta, right? Because LYNAE, even though she gives 25% liberation damage amplification, she also gives 15% all damage amplification. Plus, from her ultimate, you get extra damage dealt increased by 24% for 30 seconds. So basically, LYNAE does decent amount of damage, and LYNAE will also heavily buff your Augusta, and she can, as you can see, hold static mace as well. So honestly, if you have LYNAE, if you have Mortefi, you already have, like, if you have either of them, you can already pull Augusta and clear the endgame very easily. If you want to invest into Augusta, if you want to main Augusta, Iuno is already on the rerun, so you can also get the Iuno. So yeah, Augusta is a very good character, easy to gear, easy to make a team with, and honestly, there's nothing bad to say about her. She barely has any downsides. I will say her weapon might be the only downside, because yeah, her weapon is not really the best, because you cannot really equip that weapon on any unit and perform that good, because her weapon has way too little of a critical rate, and so it's very hard to actually build echoes for the unit that you equip that Broadblade on. So yeah, Augusta, very strong. Her weapon kind of skippable because of standard Broadblade. Verdant Summit, in my opinion, the best choice, because I run it, and with these crit stats, with these stats, I still clear. So let me see my heavy attack. Yeah, I kind of have like decent amount of heavy attack damage, but again, it can be better. But yeah, as you can see, my build is not crazy, but I still managed to just comfortably, just leisurely, just clear. And so yeah, she's a very powerful unit, nothing wrong about it. So that'll be for Augusta. Next one will be Iuno. Yeah, I will save Mornye for like the last unit, because she is one of my favorite, but I also need to talk about some pros and cons. So let's get into Iuno first before Mornye. And so for Iuno, I would say Iuno is a very good unit. She's a very powerful unit, but there are some pros and cons. Unlike Augusta, Iuno has some downsides, unlike Augusta. And so let's talk about it. So Iuno, she's a strong unit. Her DPS is good enough for clearing tower. She does a lot of liberation damage, which is one of the downsides actually of Iuno. She has a powerful Ultra skill, which is very good. And if she's not really that well built, before you fully build her, you can actually put Moonlight Clouds on her, and she actually works with those very good. I would say, yeah, just Moonlight Clouds, getting those high 12% extra damage, boost to incoming resonator, more attack, like 22.5%, very good. Honestly, she can equip this set and you can quickly just buff your Augusta or your heavy attack damage dealer. But I would say, as a GN owner, she doesn't really outperform Mortefi by that much. It's kind of like underwhelming, the performance with Iuno compared to Mortefi on GN team. So besides Augusta, I don't really see the spike in damage when equipping her or Mortefi on anyone else. So from that standpoint, unless you have someone like Chacona, because she's Arrow, she will not really increase Gian's damage that much over like Mortefi. So she's like a side grade in that team. So yeah, that's one of the downsides. She's not really the best in every aspect, but she's very powerful. And in the future, she can also be very good. The good thing about Iuno is that because her damage is so good, when she has her signature, her damage is very high. Also, she can equip some of these standard gauntlets that I don't really have, but the new standard gauntlet from 3.0 is very good on her, which makes her more budget friendly when it comes to weapons. When it comes to teammates, her best in slot for DPS will be LYNAE. So the same one you can use for Augusta, LYNAE will also amplify resistance liberation damage from Iuno. So Iuno will benefit a lot from LYNAE. So if you have LYNAE, Iuno will benefit. But I would say with Augusta, because Iuno also heals, you can actually replace Shorekeeper with LYNAE, and now having Augusta, Iuno, LYNAE on your team is, in my opinion, very good comp, and you can clear easily all the endgame as long as that endgame is not arrow or electro resistant. and you're good to go. So with that in mind, Iuno, she's very good unit. She's very good pool. Now her value overall is as follows. From my own experience, outside of Augusta, she doesn't really perform that well. She can be a good DPS, but unlike Augusta, Augusta does way more damage than Iuno. And Augusta does a lot of AoE damage. And what that means is basically area of effect. So when Augusta does her damage in combos, her DPS, she does a lot of area damage, where Iuno is more single target focused. And with enemy being so mobile, Tower of Adversity having a lot of middle tower floors where you start with mobs, that can kind of be tricky to actually pilot Iuno as a DPS than Augusta. So in this scenario, as a DPS, Augusta, no diffs, Iuno with ease. Iuno kinda is underperforming over Augusta when it comes to DPS, so that's something to keep in mind if you want to play her as a main DPS. In a game mode like Wuthering Waste, which is AoE focused game mode, she underperforms over a lot of other characters. Even Camellia is way better on that mode. I mean, Camellia is AoE, but she's a 1.0 DPS, and this is like 2.6 unit, so honestly, Camellia still outperforms Iuno if played correctly. So honestly, Iuno is not good in Wuthering Waste either, unless you use Augusta. That way you can kind of compensate for lack of AoE, with Augusta doing a lot of AoE damage. So when it comes to content, the best overall performance will come out from Augusta when it comes to Wuthering Waste and TOA. And the reason why that's very important is because TOA and Wuthering Waste give you the most amount of asteroids, which is responsible for you pulling on the banners. So, and a lot of tubes, shell credits, a lot of resources are gathered from Tower of Adversity and Wuthering Waste. So those two endgame modes are the most important in the game. There's another one like Double Form Matrix, which is like boss oriented only. I didn't really mention that mode really because Iuno can easily be clearing in that mode. For that mode specifically, Iuno is a very good DPS, and that is why I think that Iuno is one of the better units in the game, but not really a must pull because her strength is very limited due to her being Liberation character. And why I think Liberation damage matters so much. Unless you have LYNAE, Iuno DPS feels kinda like a cope. And the reason why, it's because someone like Augusta, if you don't have Iuno, you can use, right, someone like Mortefi, who buffs heavy attack damage and some attack percentage with his S6. So that's a very good alternative option, a 4-star that can be obtained very easily on almost every 10 pull in a game. Then someone like LYNAE is a very good alternative, but also LYNAE is the only premium best in slot for Iuno. There's also another character that buffs Liberation damage with their Ultra skill. For Iuno team, it'll be only 25%, and that one is Yinlin. Unfortunately, Yinlin is not really a good unit in the game because unless you already own Yinlin, pulling Yinlin in 2026 is the worst value you can possibly have because she doesn't really buff anyone as good as LYNAE. Even Liberation Electro DPS like Olcharo and Zhang Liao perform way better and deal more damage with someone like LYNAE over someone like Yinlin, who's supposed to be their best in slot. So Yinlin is not really a good choice, so that one falls out of the way. And the other unit, only other unit that's actually supposed to be budget, but in my opinion is not really budget, and that is the 5-star standard unit called Jian Xin. Her Ultra skill amplifies Resonance Liberation by 38% for 14 seconds. That's very cool for someone like Iuno because she does Liberation damage. However, almost every, even 4-star sub DPSs, they do some level of damage. Jian Xin, however, in her optimal rotation to actually use her as a sub DPS and rotate as fast as possible, she doesn't really contribute that much damage, almost no damage, even though she's a sub DPS. And that is because Kuro made a very big mistake with her design, trying to make her jack of all trades, but unfortunately she masters none of them, because her kit, in order to fully function, you need to cancel the most important move in her kit, and that is her Forte Circuit. As you can see, this is her Forte Circuit. You charge this by basic attacks, resonance skill, and etc. If you have S1, S2, you're getting way faster rotation, but the problem is the most of her damage that she will do on the field lies in this 40 circuit. When this 40 circuit is filled like this, you hold heavy attack and wait until this is depleted, and this is kind of very slow for today's standards, especially because you really, this kind of stuff can affect your Tower of Adversity clear times. Even Whimpering Waste, this is very irrelevant. And honestly, this gives you like a few stacks of shields, which is kind of cool in some scenarios, but for Iuno specifically, this takes too long, dealing not enough damage to compensate for the time you're actually doing this. And if you stop, you're just canceling mid charging. Yeah, it's not even worth doing. So, and you can eventually get interrupted very easily. And she's standing still, taking damage. Yeah, she takes 50% less damage, but it's not really like recommended using Janshin, because unfortunately, even at S2, which is in my opinion the best sequence for Janshin, this one gives you extra resonance skill use case, which means you can also get additional concerto energy and ER. As you can see, I got S3. This one does nothing for her rotation. As a sub DPS, she benefits from this. S1 also benefits because faster 40 charge. And basically what you do in optimal rotation is that once this is filled up, you hold heavy attack to start consuming the chi, and as soon as you start, you cancel with casting scale, or maybe like dash, or like release, and then ult, and then when your concerto is filled up, you swap to another character. So that's basically what you're trying to do with Janshin. You also need to use a weapon like Marcato, and even with R5 Marcato, yeah, she can provide those buffs, but without decent damage, she kinda makes your Iuno not do enough damage. And honestly, unless your Iuno is like fully built, and when I say fully built, these stats right here almost don't clear. So in order for these stats to clear, you need her signature, otherwise her damage is falling off significantly. And Iuno is kind of the only character on our team doing damage, because Janshin paired with Shorekeeper, they both do like 0 damage. So your Iuno is the only one doing all the damage, and so her build needs to be god level. It needs to be close to 300% critical damage. This needs to be like 80% critical rate, and then your attack should be like this, maybe slightly higher. Then you need a lot of damage bonuses, and so like investment can be very heavily. I have 0 liberation damage bonuses, as you can see, that's very bad. But overall, Iuno with the Janshin, in my opinion, is a cope, because Janshin is such a bad unit. Unfortunately, she's the worst unit in the game in my opinion, because at least LYNAE can be used as a DPS and clear content. This character, even as a sub DPS at S2, is still not really making you perform that well. So honestly, if you pull Iuno without LYNAE and without Augusta, that's kinda not really good value for your account. Despite of what other people might say, from my personal experience, she wasn't really performing that well without Augusta. With Augusta, she makes Augusta overkill, and even build like this feels broken on Augusta, because Iuno just gives you that 90% damage amp on Augusta, and that's really broken. And so with that in mind, Iuno is a very powerful pull if you have Augusta, and she can also be a good DPS in double pawn matrix. But outside of that, in TOA, the floor needs to be single target only, otherwise she will struggle to perform. So with that being said, Iuno, in my opinion, is a very good value if you have Augusta or LYNAE. If you don't have Augusta or LYNAE, her value is basically skippable. She's not really that good for accounts if you don't have Augusta and LYNAE, or LYNAE, right? One of those, and then she is more valuable. But again, that AoE kind of hurts her value, and being liberation damage dealer, not having enough choices as a budget kind of hurts as well. So in my opinion, if you don't have LYNAE, don't even think about pulling Iuno for DPS. You kind of will be disappointed. And yeah, with Augusta, you can easily pull Iuno if you have spare pulls, and your Iuno Augusta team will just clear everything, every game mode. And so yeah, I will prefer between the two Augusta, because any account getting Augusta can benefit. Any account getting Iuno, it's questionable whether or not you will benefit, if you don't have Augusta. So that's my honest opinion. Augusta, not sig reliant, and very good budget option like Mortefi. And yeah, her best in slot makes her overkill. And yeah, that's basically what I have to say about Iuno now. Yeah, if you have Augusta, very good pull, almost a must pull. But if you don't have Augusta, skip. So that will be for Iuno. Now let's go to the last character, but certainly not the least, and this one is Mornye. Mornye, in my opinion, is one of the best units in the entire game, probably one of the most must pulls in the entire game. The reason why, it's very simple. There is actually a pro and con when it comes to Mornye. The best reason why Mornye is so good is because, as you can see, my build is looking very weird for those who don't know what the requirements are. Defense needs to be as high as possible. 260% is the maximum requirement for the energy region, so you can get the maximum amount of buffs and the maximum damage from your ult. Critical damage as high as possible is also recommended for the maximum damage for your ult. As you can see, this echo set is very good for her. You can easily get those stats. She basically uses 4-3-3-1-1. I use as a main stat critical damage. You can also use defense stat as a main stat on 4 cost. It will also contribute a lot of damage for your ultimate. Your substats should be energy region and potentially defense percentage, flat defense, also liberation damage, and some critical damage will all benefit your Mornye. The next one will be like 3 costs. All of them should be energy region. If you don't have her signature, if you do have her signature, one of the 3 costs can actually be fusion damage bonus for more damage, right? And your 1 cost should always be a defense stat, because she scales of defense. All her healing, damage, scales of defense. So that's basically what you want for build. Now for the weapon, I use Discord. Honestly, I don't see any reason to pull her signature. Discord is more than enough. You get massive concerto energy when casting resonance skill, which is part of her rotation. She rotates very fast once you get used to her rotation. She's not really bad, she's very easy to rotate, but it has some learning curve. It took me today a little bit of effort to actually figure out exact optimal rotation. So now when I learned her rotation, she's very fast, consistent, and very good. With Discord, you have more than enough energy from this weapon, a lot of concerto. Concerto means faster rotation, energy region means easier reaching this requirement. So she's very good, she's very powerful. Now let's talk about her kit, right? Her kit basically says Ultra Skill amplifies entire team by 25% for all damage types, right? The other one that we have is from Liberation, that gets up to 80% critical rate and critical damage up to 160% based on your energy region for that nuke. Then you get that high Syntony field during that ult, and that lasts for 25 seconds. So increase defense by 20% for entire team, then resistance to interruption, and then healing multiplier is increased by 40%. That doesn't really matter that much, but defense is also very good. And off-tune build-up rate is also very important. The Syntony field gives you extra like 50% boost to your off-tune level build-up, so you can easily get tune break very fast. So very powerful ability. Two tune break abilities per rotation is very strong. So yeah, she's very good with that one. Also her forte circuit has observation mode, and in this mode you want to cast this where is it, inversion. This heavy attack basically inflicts observation marker on a target for 30 seconds, and with this in effect, basically when observation marker is on the target, when any resonator in a team activates tune break, it basically deals tune break damage with the tune break skill. Inflict with the observation marker, you get Mornye to inflict inferred marker. Any interfered marker lasts for 8 seconds, and this one says as follows: when target is affected by tune rupture or tune strain interfered, they can increase damage for all resonators in the team up to 40%. Based on your energy region. So if you have 260% energy region as I do, you'll have extra 40% damage increase for entirety. Like anyone who does damage on the boss that's inflicted with this marker will just deal 40% more damage. So this is basically, these buffs are stronger than Shorekeeper, but this buff is kind of tricky. The reason why, it's because LYNAE is the only one who can make this happen. The reason why is because, okay, this one doesn't explain it, but Mornye LYNAE kinda inflicts something called Tune Rupture and Tune Strain shifting. And when shifting is on a target, the next time you activate Tune Break, when they have shifting on it, then you activate Tune Rupture interfered or Tune Strain interfered, depending on which one you have selected here. With that in mind, if you have Tune Rupture shifting, you will activate Tune Rupture interfered, and then LYNAE, both LYNAE and Mornye will respond to this Tune Rupture and Tune Strain interfered. So this state only comes after the shifting, and shifting can only be inflicted by LYNAE. So without LYNAE, your Mornye will not give that 40% extra damage. Why is that important? Because with this in mind, a lot of people ask themselves, is Mornye worth it and is she better than Shorekeeper? Answer is yes and no. Answer is yes if you fulfill one of the three requirements. First, requirement number one, which is in my opinion the most effective one, and that is S1. With S1, you increase from 8 seconds duration on that buff to 20 seconds duration, which is more than enough because every character's DPS rotation lasts for like around 12 seconds. So 12 seconds being the DPS rotation, and you get 20 seconds duration of your 40% extra damage buff is very, very powerful. So, and this makes it so you don't have to rely on LYNAE, which makes Mornye independent support, but it costs you additional copy, which is good if you have corals, but if you don't have corals, this can kind of be basically exchanging future unit for a copy of Mornye. In my opinion, this is the best investment. You can stop at S1 and your Mornye will outperform Shorekeeper on every single team in a game that's not negative status, because on negative status teams, Shorekeeper is also not really good there. So every team that will use Shorekeeper will use Mornye and perform better if you have S1, so you don't have to use LYNAE. Now the second requirement you need to actually make Mornye better than Shorekeeper will be the one we mentioned very frequently in this video, and that is LYNAE. As I mentioned before, LYNAE can inflict this shifting, and with her having shifting on the target, she just needs to damage the targets. Then when she does, it's basically very simple. When LYNAE damages the target with certain moves, I think it's the outro skill or the one of these this photochromic flux is basically within the spray paint. Photochromic flux, she activates this very frequently, and this is basically inflicts that shifting, and then she will respond to the interfered state when the target is hit by Tune Break. So basically how this works, you have LYNAE, you do her rotation, and before you switch to your main DPS, you activate Tune Break, and then when you do your DPS rotation, you can to be certain, you can count in your head 1, 2, 3, 4. After 4 or 5 seconds, if your Tune Break is available again, you can activate Tune Break on your main DPS and extend by extra 8 seconds the duration of the buff. So you can basically play around that 8-second duration because it's kind of short. As we said before, 12 seconds is required for most of the DPSs in the game, so 8 seconds can actually make or break your DPS damage output. So yeah, basically what you want to activate the Tune Break in the middle of LYNAE, if possible, then you get on your main DPS. I use the Spectral Rover on the TOA to actually test how exactly this works, and basically I had this buff up for most of the time, so it's very easy to trigger it. However, if you don't trigger it the way I said, you can kinda lose that buff before your DPS rotation is over, and that might be a slight downside of having S0 Mornye. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you do your rotation right, if you do your timings correctly, your Mornye and LYNAE should basically make any DPS in a game very, very strong. So that's the second requirement, and I would say this one is almost on par with S1 Mornye, because S1 Mornye in my opinion is better, because then instead of using LYNAE, and LYNAE is like 5-star version of Sanhua, she can be slotted on any team, on any DPS, and still make that DPS do a lot of damage for clear. However, LYNAE is not as good as their best in slot. For example, someone like Zani, she prefers Phoebe way more than she prefers LYNAE. And so Zani, Phoebe, Mornye will be way better team if Mornye can have that S1. With S1, Mornye can be slotted on any team using their best in slot. For example, instead of playing Augusta, LYNAE, Mornye S1 with Iuno will buff Augusta way more than LYNAE Mornye. So if you don't have S1 Mornye, you need to use LYNAE alongside Mornye, and then that DPS will do a lot of damage. But S1 is basically so valuable because it makes you so you don't have to actually play LYNAE in order to get the maximum value of Mornye. So Mornye is a very powerful unit, very strong, and has potential to outperform Shorekeeper. With S1, you basically have the easiest escape from this situation, and you can easily just buff your units, make them do more damage than you'll be with Shorekeeper, and honestly, that's a very good value. Mornye is one of the rare units in a game, one of the few of them who actually is worth getting S1 and actually worth getting copies, because that copy actually makes all of your teams stronger. So any team that you slot Mornye on will do way more damage with those buffs on. If you have LYNAE, that will do way more damage because you can enable her entire kit. If you have S1 that she doesn't need LYNAE, you can use their DPS the best in slot. For example, for Gian, you can use Chacona instead of LYNAE and it will do more damage. You can use someone like Iuno or Mortefi and it will do more damage. So S1 Mornye is, in my opinion, the biggest value. I kind of lost 50-50, so unfortunately for me, I will have to wait for the rerun and save a lot of pulls so I can get the S1 Mornye. But I highly suggest, if you have enough pulls, S1 Mornye will give you the most value out of any unit on the roster right now. So S1 Mornye is definitely the best value in the game right now. So that'll be said for the sequence for LYNAE. Now let's go to the final and last requirement for you to actually get Mornye, and this one will decide whether or not you should get Mornye, or you should maybe skip her now and get her on a rerun if you want to save pulls, if you have limited pulls and stuff. So let's talk about the third requirement. The third requirement is actually another unit, and that one is LUPA. LUPA is one of the most broken characters in the entire game. She's the best fusion unit in the entire game since her release. The reason why, it's pretty simple. Her kit basically gives you auto skill that says amplifies 20% basic 20% fusion damage amplification and basic attack damage amplification of 25% for incoming resonator. This is very good for someone like Brent, someone like Anchor, very good to actually make that team very strong. But the thing is, this is actually not why she's so powerful. Why she's so powerful is because she does a lot of damage, and even though she contributes a lot of damage from her kit, not as much as the main DPS, she has some powerful buffs on her kit. First buff that I will mention will be the one right here. So the first buff that she will provide to the entire team is fusion resistance for 3% for every fusion character you have on a team. If you have full mono fusion team, that's 3 characters, that's 9%. And when there are 3 fusion characters in a team, you additionally get 6% fusion resistance on enemy. So basically this makes LUPA very strong because 15%, this 9% that stacks up, and 6% on top is 15% resistance ignore. Every single boss in the game has 10% resistance to all of the attribute, and to their own attribute of their own element they have 30% resistance. So this shred can basically potentially, right, make fusion resistant bosses actually get more damage from your fusion team than they will have otherwise, right? They'll have a lot of resistance, and if you use this LUPA's buff, you can probably clear even on fusion bosses, which is kind of crazy, which is there are almost no teams in the game that can actually achieve that outside of mono fusion team. That is why mono fusion team, even though they kind of cost a lot of premium units, they still are to this day one of the best teams you can possibly make in a game because LUPA is so strong. So LUPA gives you 15% resistance ignore. That's very strong buff, huge damage increase. Now that's not the only thing. So the second thing that she offers is very easy. She gives 6% attack and also it can stack up to 18%. So 18% attack increase is way more than a substat on your Echo, and this can actually give you a decent boost on your scaling. So far every single fusion character and DPS in the game is scales of attack, so this basically buffs the entire team, including LUPA's damage and your other fusion characters' damage. Honestly, any fusion DPS that you have, including Encore, benefits from this a lot. That's not the only thing. So 18%, and again, you need to have cast intro skill, Pack Hunt gets enhanced, and then you get additional until 18%. This is basically 2 outro skills and you're good. The other one is 10% fusion damage bonus, and if there are if you have 3 fusion characters in a team, again, fusion damage bonus against overworld class or calamity class, which is basically the bosses, actual bosses, the big guys. So those big bosses additionally take 10% fusion damage. So 20% fusion damage, 18% attack increase, and 15% 15% resistance, fusion resistance ignore is very, very strong as a team-wide buff. It's even outperforming Shorekeeper's buffs, and so these outro skills just adds even more power on top. Now let's combine this general fusion damage amplification 20% with someone like Mornye, right? Mornye says 25% to entire team. So basically what you would do in this situation is, because LUPA with her outro can only fully buff basic attack damage fusion characters like Encore and Brand, what if I just want to use someone like Changli? Maybe I want to use someone like Galbrena, right? To experiment a little bit, have more fun. Maybe even Chisha. Chisha uses a lot of resonance skill damage, so unless you buff her with Brand, she will lose like 25% amplification from LUPA's outro skill. And basically how Monofusion team worked so far is that you go from outro skill to outro skill. So no team-wide outro skill buff so far in Monofusion team, so this is brand new. And because Mornye is the only fusion support, general support in the game, she's perfect partner with LUPA. So now if you have someone like LUPA, you can also have a very strong Monofusion team, because now 25% and 20%, that's 45% for any fusion DPS amplification. And if you buffing someone like Encore or Brand, now that's all of a sudden you get additional 25, and with 45% fusion basic attack damage amplification and 25 from Mornye, that's equivalent of 70% damage amplification for any fusion DPS. And as I said before, 15% resistance shred for fusion, and then extra 18% attack increase and 20% damage bonus. But that's not all, because LUPA uses something called Flaming Clove Print, and this one does as follows. Casting Liberation grants all resonators in the team 15% fusion damage bonus and caster 20% liberation. So 15% fusion damage bonus on top all of her other team-wide buffs. LUPA, as you can see, is the best fusion unit in the game, because she can buff entire Monofusion team and make them do a lot of damage. And so with this in mind, 35% fusion damage bonus, 18% attack increase, 15% resistance shred, and her outro skill, everything is enabled because of Mornye. And Mornye also having her set also buffs entire fusion cast with extra 25% attack increase and fat 25% all damage amplification for 30 seconds. So she's very cool, very strong. She also does a bit more damage because of LUPA, and LUPA will basically make your Encore, which is a standard unit, do a lot of damage. So thanks to Mornye, now you have, instead of waiting for Brand building his echoes forever, now you can get Mornye. I literally built her in like 5 minutes. Like I had to like re-roll this one cost just to get that extra ER roll. Now I have everything I need with Discord. She's so easy to build, so budget, and so she will give you a huge mileage if you have LUPA, and then your Encore or Chisha can be your third slot, and now you have full Monofusion team because of Mornye and LUPA, right? So that's very good. And if you have someone like Galbrena but not Chuyan, and you're like, oh, I'm kind of struggling, you can now put Mornye, LUPA, and Galbrena, and that team will clear everything. because LUPA does a lot of AoE and Galbrena has broken grouping and does a lot of AoE as well. So honestly, that's a third option. Honestly, in my opinion, even though it's kind of the worst out of 3 options, it's still very good requirement because LUPA is such a good character for every fusion character, every fusion team. So Mornye just buffing LUPA's value is even better. So yeah, if you have LUPA, LYNAE, or you have enough pulls to get S1 Mornye, Mornye is without a doubt a must pull for you. So with that in mind, I hope helped you decide whether or not you should pull any of these units. I think Mornye is an amazing character, and honestly, she's being better than Shorekeeper in so many scenarios, and with LYNAE just being like way better than Shorekeeper, and with S1 just being complete power creep to Shorekeeper, I would say Mornye is basically Shorekeeper 2.0. And even though she has some restrictions, it's basically for the balance purpose. Otherwise, yeah, the things will be a little bit more controversial if she's just direct power creep. But honestly, I like this balancing. She's still stronger than Shorekeeper if you have the requirements for making her strong. And honestly, I can't be more happy because I really don't like huge power creeps in a game. And honestly, the last time we got such a character like Mornye was back in 1.3, which was 1.5 years ago, and that was Shorekeeper. So Shorekeeper, very good, high value still to this day. Same goes for Mornye. Mornye is basically a future proof. Once you have at least one of these requirements, she's future proof for the respective teams. And yeah, I hope I helped you in this video decide who should you pull. If you enjoyed these kind of informative videos, make sure to like and subscribe for the future videos like this, and I will be making a spreadsheet when I make compilation with Mornye and LYNAE to show you whether or not you should so you can actually see how many DPSs maybe on your account can benefit from Mornye and LYNAE combined, even at S0. So yeah, if you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and see you in the next video. And yeah, let me know in the comment section below who will you pull or will you see for TEAMATES and LUPA. So see you in the next video. Peace.